All right, we're rolling. We're here with Marko, WhiteBoard Finance, well known in the YouTube sphere, also popular on Twitter, talking finance. Marko, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
We're excited for this one.
You got a beautiful podcast set up, by the way. You've given us inspiration for future episodes. We got to get our shit together for sure.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It looks better than it actually is. It's just knowing what to do, just like anything in life.
Mm-hmm.
How to set it up.
We're excited for this one because it's one of those conversations that, you know, we have a finance guy on the Meat Mafia podcast. So I'm sure the audience is like, what's going on here? What are these guys going to talk about? I think we just riff for a bit and talk about, you know, your story, but also I think before the podcast, we were talking, there's tons of overlap between personal health and financial health and how those are intertwined. So we'll dive deep. We'll talk about, you know, a number of different topics, but I think maybe a good place to start is just how you got started on YouTube and sort of how you've made your presence.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, thanks again for having me on, guys. I was going to go grab my Amazon Play money. That's why I was looking over there. It's like stacks of $100 bills. They're not real. But I think, like, you know, you got to do the cheesy thumbnails with your, you know, mouth wide open and the stacks of hundreds. Otherwise, otherwise it's not a proper finance video, right?
Yeah.
I'm joking. I say that in jest. So I'm 34 years old, you know, grew up in Northeast Ohio, just a regular kid. And then I was able to make full-time income from my YouTube channel about 2.5 to 3 years ago now. So, but the origin story way before that, and the reason I'm giving my age is because, you know, I've been investing pretty much my whole adult life since I was 18 years old. So for 16 years now. I came from a similar background, I believe, as you, Harry. I worked in commercial real estate, worked in, you know, traditional finance. I have a finance degree. I was just always intrigued by the stock market. But even before that, which kind of, it may be an okay transition for this podcast, I actually, you know, played soccer at a very high level my entire life since I was basically 7 years old. So health was always kind of like an afterthought for me. You know, it's always like I was one of those players that was lucky enough to have, you know, God-given talent, and I took that for granted. You know, I took it for granted all throughout, you know, pretty much high school. And then I realized, oh, okay, like to get to the next level or to be able to play at a higher level, you know, you need to have the physical capability as well. So I feel like I had talent on the soccer field, but never took my health seriously. And the reason I'm saying all this is because I think one of you tweeted, I was fit but unhealthy. Is that the phrase?
Yeah, that was Brett.
That was a term that I used when I was a college baseball player. It's like, yeah, you're 180 pounds and externally you look healthy, but maybe you have like a chronically inflamed gut or some other chronic disease that people don't know about, because we typically as a society just associate health with your physical appearance and if you're fat or if you're aesthetically pleasing. So
100%.
Also when you're 18 too, like it doesn't matter what you're putting in your body. If you go and work out, you're going to build muscle and look good. Yeah, I guess that guy's healthy, but you could easily be eating garbage all day.
Yeah, so I fit the traditional definition of like, okay, you know, I'm able to play soccer, but then I'm out till 3 a.m, you know, going to the club or whatever, fake ID, all that stuff, like all throughout, you know, I'd say since I was like 17 and up, right? And then what dawned on me was luckily enough, a close friend of mine that I grew up with was actually my roommate in college, and him and I went to a D1 college. He was actually the kicker for the football team. And then, you know, he's gone every day working out, this and that. And seeing his habits kind of made me start taking my health more seriously. And also the biggest wake up call for me was my freshman year, where you gain your like freshman 15. I didn't gain 15. I feel like I was born 165 pounds. I can't gain or lose 15 pounds. But my point is that I was at this soccer tournament and like my friend was like, dude, is that like a roll? You know, and I've never had rolls in my life, bro. I'm talking about, I was always like, you know, super skinny, always very lean. But, you know, after you're eating, you know, layers of pizza and this and that at 2, 3 in the morning, going to bed, drinking alcohol, you know, literally just drinking bread in the form of beer. You know, it's like you're defeating what your body can naturally do, you know, especially at that age where you're kind of just like an incinerator. It doesn't matter what you eat, right?
Yeah.
But I finally saw that, and that's when the light bulb went off that I really have to start taking my health seriously.
Was that right around the same time you started thinking about your personal finance endeavors? Like, were those things happening at the same time? Like, hey, let me just get serious about everything here.
Yeah, so that's a good question that would make sense logically. I just feel like with finance, it's weird. I was always naturally inclined towards like numbers. So like my dad is a mechanical engineer, super smart guy. My mom is really good with numbers, so I got that from both of them. So I'm very good at like basic and entrepreneurial math. So I always like to like sell stuff, always like to, you know, hustle. I was selling, funnily enough, I was selling Pokemon cards like when I was like 13, 14 years old. I never cared about the game. I was like, okay, this one's worth more, this one's worth that. And then now
Love
we have like grown men doing it in 2022. I
it.
think it was kind of funny.
We're
But
waiting
my
for your Pokemon video to drop on YouTube.
yeah, maybe that'll go viral. But no, I've been out of the game for like 20 years now. No, all joking aside, it's like that's a good question, but I was always naturally inclined towards numbers and finance and seeing like, okay, what do rich people do? They buy real estate, they buy stocks. It's like it would be nice to be rich. So like the origin story is my parents are immigrants. You know, it's like they came here in the late 70s. I was born here. I was born in Cleveland. And it's like I didn't come from like a traditional like silver spoon in your mouth kind of a background. It's just like, you know, you have to figure stuff out on your own as you get older. So I'm like, what do rich people invest in? Oh, okay,
Hmm.
duh. It's stocks, it's real estate, it's, you know, tangible, scarce assets that go up in value, right? So naturally, you can't afford real estate at 18 years old in most cases.
Mhm.
So I went towards stocks. So I was 18 years old, opened up a Trade King account. They don't exist anymore. I think they were bought by like Fidelity or one of these bigger brokerages. But ultimately, I did that because they were $4.95 a trade. So that doesn't exist anymore. Everyone's free now. Everyone, you know,
Mhm.
you have kids that are, you know, 15 years old jumping on Robinhood and stuff like that. But the reason for this origin story is that I think that finance and is just one piece of the puzzle in life. I'm not one of these people
Mhm.
that lives to invest and I'm up at 2 in the morning reading 10Ks and all these different, you know, pro formas and stuff like that. I think finance should also just be a piece of the puzzle, just how health is, right? Or
Right.
relationships are. And, you know, maybe if you want to start a family and things like that, these are all pieces of life that complement one another. Nothing is like the sole answer, at least for me. So I
Mhm.
think that if you have, you know, one of these aspects in order, it allows you to have the other aspects of life in order. So if you have your finances in order, you can afford to eat, you know, healthier food. For the that there's a stigma around that, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I feel like, you know, there's a million studies that show that people that are in lower income areas, you know, they gravitate towards, you know, the McDonald's and the fast food and things like that. And some of that comes from, you know, lack of education that, hey, your dollar can buy you stuff that's equivalent in calories to McDonald's, but, you know, a million times healthier kind of a thing. So I feel like for me, finance is just one piece of the puzzle. Health is another piece of the puzzle. You know, relationships are another piece of the puzzle. Travel is another piece of the puzzle. And
Hmm.
that's kind of like a holistic view that I hold.
Yeah, it's like a big stool that you need all the different legs to function properly, and they all need to be firing on all cylinders. So
For
totally
sure.
agree with what you're saying there. And there is such a strong correlation between finance and food when you're talking about becoming a sovereign individual. I'm curious, Marko. So 18 is very young, I think, to actually be getting invested in the stock market. Was there a book, or what was the motivation to actually like pull the trigger and opening up that brokerage account? Because I know a lot of people talk about like reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, the light bulb going off. Is that how it was for you, or was there something else that just pulled you to actually get in the game?
So that's a great question. So I actually read Rich Dad Poor Dad, but this was after. I want to say this was maybe like freshman year in college. So I was probably like 19 or so when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Mm-hmm.
But that'll definitely shift the paradigm in your head from, you know, being a typical American consumer and consuming to understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. But no, I didn't read any book. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a kid. I was 18 years old. So I'm not going to pretend like I'm some, you know, stock guru. It's, you know, you play soccer. Oh, I'm buying Nike stock. Oh, I have an iPod. I'm going to buy Apple stock. You know, it's stuff that most people, how they invest today, right? Oh,
Yeah.
I use a MacBook to edit. I'm going to buy Apple stock. You know, that
Get
kind of a
those blue
thing.
chips.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like you don't know what the hell you're doing. But luckily enough, you know, those were all good companies. You know, I wasn't investing in like penny stocks or things like that. But I will say the graduation of my timeline of investing is not like sophistication increased, but I would say like the maturity of investing. One of my early finance professors taught me about ETFs and index funds, and this was probably around 2007. 2008ish, right around there. So instead of, so for the audience that may not know what those things are, if you picture like one stock, say I want to buy one share of Apple, well, 100% of your portfolio is Apple. If you want to buy one share of an index fund is a basket of stocks. So it could be Apple, Microsoft, Johnson and Johnson, whatever. So you're automatically well diversified, and it tracks an index as opposed to tracking one individual company. So I'm a big proponent of teaching people early on that they should at least start investing for the long term in index funds and ETFs. That way, they're not buying, butt floss coin and then it tanking 99.9% and them getting a bad taste in their mouth saying, I'm never going to invest again. I lost all my net worth on one thing, right? So individual stocks have a time and place, but I think index funds and ETFs are kind of like the introduction to finance, just how you guys, I'm sure, have introduction principles to like a healthier lifestyle through food.
What would so you're talking to like a college graduate was in your shoes when you were first getting started. How would you convey your messaging to them, just getting skin in the game, figuring out actually how to invest? Do you have like some basic principles that people should follow?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that most people, going back to the analogy of 18-year-old Marko, oh, I wear Nike soccer cleats, I'm going to buy Nike. I use a, iPad, I'm going to buy Apple, right?
Yeah.
That's a good way to invest because it's common sense investing. But I think that most people, they get into this stuff without really understanding why they're investing in the first place. So I think if you bring it back to basic principles or square one, you need to understand, okay, I'm investing for this reason. I'm buying this company for this reason. I choose to invest in this index fund for this reason. I think a lot of people we're seeing right now in the market is that there's a 10, 20, 30% correction, and people are panic selling because they don't even know why they bought the thing they bought in the first place. So I think even before you click the purchase button, it may make sense to start a paper account with fake money. Say you have $100,000 in play money. Do that for a couple quarters, or do it for a year. See what happens. If you're okay with the ups and downs of the market with that paper money, then I think it may make sense to start with real money. But at the end of the day, the best time to start is now. Best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Best time to start investing is now.
So I guess, like, as you look at it today, there's a lot going on in the stock market. Is there anything that you would advise people who are relatively new going through their first correction? So it sounds like your first real experience of a downturn was 07, 08.
Yeah.
So you've at least lived through one period of some negative returns. How would you help people get through, what's to come?
Yeah, I think they need to zoom out. So if you look at any chart of, S&P 500 or individual stocks that have been successful, obviously some have gone down as well. But if you just zoom out in the macro picture of the market overall, I tell people, you should check out VTI, ticker symbol VTI. It's just the total stock market index fund. You're basically tracking roughly 4,000 companies that are publicly traded in the United States. So what the market does as a whole, that VTI ticker symbol, that ETF or index fund, is typically going to follow. So if the market has been, up and to the right for the last, let's call it 100 years, that's typically what that investment is going to do. So I'm not telling people to buy VTI. I'm just saying, if you look at the macro picture of stocks, what they've done, they've historically returned roughly a 9 to 11% return ROI year after year since its inception. So I trust me, I'm not one of these like stock market shills that says, oh, your net worth has to be 100% in stocks. My net worth isn't. I think 30% of my net worth is in stocks. The rest is in real estate, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, things like that, cash. But at the end of the day, you have to understand that money is best served when it's being used for something. It's not going to help you if it's sitting under your mattress or in your closet or buried in your backyard, because you're losing purchasing power to inflation.
Marko, can you explain the concept of just compounding interest as it relates to index funds? Because that's something that I think a lot of people hear, but I think there's actually probably a good percentage of people that might not actually know what that term means.
Yeah, so Albert Einstein called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. So if you think about it, say, for example, you have Uncle Joe who buries $1,000 in his backyard or under his mattress, right? So that money stays $1,000, but the rate of inflation is going up. Right now, inflation is at 8.54% year over year. So that means the cost of most goods and services, or all goods and services on average, went up 8.5%, while Uncle Joe's money did what? It gained zero. It's sitting under his mattress, right? So compound interest is the concept of your interest making interest on your interest in perpetuity. So if you start with $1,000, Uncle Joe's making 0% in his mattress, you're making 10% a year in the stock market. Well, then your 10% becomes 1,100, or 1,100 would be the math. Then that 1,100 gains 10%. Then that whatever that next number is gains 10%, so on and so forth, and it compounds over time. That's why when I said earlier in the podcast, getting started now is important, because when you start investing, the younger you are, the more time you have, or the more time in the market is better than timing the market. That gives your money more time to compound on itself.
Marko, one of the things that I kind of struggled with, I think, with my finances when I started branching off and doing my own thing, was figuring out when to invest in myself, in my, like, the business endeavors that I'm doing, and then when to put money into like a equity fund, or, stocks. How would you, as an entrepreneur, like, think about that? Like, I think a lot of like 22-year-olds might even be better off going and investing in like a course that they could then go double down on and start teaching someone something, So is there something there that you would think about when you're talking to one of your clients or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, if you look at any entrepreneur that's successful, and don't get me wrong, 9 out of 10 fail, right? Their investment goes to zero. But if you look at any entrepreneur, the ROI that you're going to get from starting a successful business will trump any return that you're going to get in the market. In the market, most crypto, unless it's, a shit coin that's a scam that, 100x's then dumps, whatever. But that's maybe later in the podcast, we can talk about that. But the ROI, it's not going to be matched. So let's take a look at my YouTube channel, for example. So this studio and the other scene that I have over here to my left, which is in front of a big whiteboard, a big dry erase board. I have a couple cameras, couple lights, couple microphones, whatever. Let's say I'm 3-4 grand all in, right? Well, my YouTube channel has made thousands of X of that. Okay. So, or hundreds, whatever. I don't want to do the math, but just hypothetically speaking, it's made thousands of percent in return on top of what I invested. Now, that's not to say that every business is going to succeed. My results are obviously my own results, because I had a background in finance. I had, experience. I'm somewhat of a subject matter expert when I talk about this stuff. So I was able to create a channel that did well, just like your Twitter channels or your Twitter feeds have blown up just because your followers have exploded. I remember I started following you guys when you guys had a few hundred people. I clicked on one of your names the other day, and I always get confused because I don't know who's who from the avatar. One of you guys has like 50, 60,000 followers. Like, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I think people need to have funds. So if you think of different savings accounts or different funds, think of these buckets that you fill with water. You should have a travel fund. I feel that people that don't travel, they lack perspective that other people who are well-traveled have.
So
That may
true.
sound elitist or nose in the air. I don't care, because it's 100% true. The more I travel, the more I realize I don't know shit about shit. Okay. So
Yep.
So true, man.
it is. And people argue with that. Oh, I'm happy on my farm in Kansas. Well, good for you. That's great. But, I have a perspective on the world that you don't. And I don't care if that sounds like elitist or nose in the air, because I'm not that kind of a person. And when I travel, I'm talking like, go everywhere. Go to first world countries. Go to third world countries. Go to places where people don't have a toilet to piss in or a window to throw it out of, and go to places where people, go to the Vatican. I don't know, biggest
Yeah.
real estate owner in the world. My point is to all this is that you should have buckets for everything you want to do in life. Have a business bucket, have a travel bucket, have a savings and emergency bucket, have a real estate bucket. And once those buckets get filled, then take 2-3 grand from that bucket, buy a camera, start a YouTube channel, AKA start a business. You have 2-3 grand in your travel bucket, go overseas. You have, 20, 30 grand in your real estate bucket, go put a down payment on a rental property. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's funny how that, oh, go ahead, Clemenza.
No, I think we were going to say the same thing. I just think that it's such a holistic approach to thinking about how you want to manage your life and like what you want to get out of it, which goes back to your original intent point. Like, why are you investing? It's so that you can get these experiences in life, and then also funnel them into your businesses, grow your own personal wealth, but then also just be able to like enjoy all these different aspects of life under one umbrella, which is just like having this balanced approach where you're not necessarily stretched in like all these different ways, which I feel like, I mean, it's a really hard equation to crack for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's because so first and foremost, the younger you are, the more risk you're able to bear. You don't have a wife, you don't have kids, you don't have dependents, you don't have employees, for the most part. I'm talking,
Right.
90% of 20-year-olds don't have that. So you're able to take on more risk. But as you get older, that window is only going to get smaller and smaller to where you can take risks to start a business and, leave your W-2 job and do that stuff. I'm sure you guys are, probably seeing that yourselves in terms of, trying to make this a full-time endeavor. And I hope nothing more than you guys succeeding, because you guys have a very important message and I'm one of your biggest fans. And that's why I'm on this podcast today. If I didn't believe in what you guys were talking about, I'd just say, oh, sorry, I'm busy, or I probably wouldn't even respond. I don't respond to 99% of my DMs. But my point is that when you start to get older, say you're now, instead of being 22-year-old, Clemenza, you're now 42-year-old Clemenza, and you got a wife, 2 kids, and dependents, you're making, 75 grand a year. It's like, you don't have the resources unless you start from scratch and bootleg or bootstrap it, that window of opportunity may close. So my advice is not going to make you a bajillionaire. You're not going to go to the moon on butt floss coin with my advice, but I promise you're not going to end up in the poorhouse either. Where you're probably going to end up is very happy by the time you're 60 with a very fulfilling life with my advice.
Marko, do you believe that everyone has the ability to become rich and financially independent?
Absolutely. Immigrants do it every day. People that come here with no English, no money, no nothing, they do it every day. You can take a look at, certain family members. They're not my family members or my wife's family members. They came here with nothing. Their grandpa worked at Ford Motor Company 7 days a week, lifting engine blocks, put 3 kids through medical school. It's no excuses, but I know a lot of people don't like to hear that in 2022.
Yeah, it's hard to not be motivated when you hear that. And then you contrast that to what you said. You said start a business, AKA get yourself a microphone and a camera. And it's like the leverage of the internet has never been greater, where you can literally buy yourself a microphone and a camera and start an unbelievable brand, build yourself up to over 800,000 YouTube subscribers in a few years. It's like, it's very hard to not get motivated when we hear that.
This is literally, if you have an internet connection and a phone, like you're carrying the knowledge of the world in your pocket. So it just takes a lot of focus and discipline, just like working out. Before we started this podcast, you can't pay for 6-pack abs. You can't pay for, being able to run a mile in a certain amount of time. You can't pay for that stuff because it has to be earned if you're physically able and all that. I'm not saying if you're handicapped or anything like that, but if you're able to, that shows that you're eating right. It shows that you're, burning calories. You're in a caloric deficit if you have a certain amount of body fat. Like that stuff cannot be paid for. You can buy the Lamborghini, you can buy the yacht, you can buy all that stuff, but you can't buy the results.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm interested on the point of starting an internet business, because you've obviously had a lot of success with it. Are there any secret sauces or just war stories that you have that if there's like a young guy or gal who's trying to get into it, like what would you tell them about starting an internet business? Because it's obviously the way of the future, right? There's gonna be more and more creators. There's gonna be more and more people who have a story to tell and want to get it out there. So what would you tell them as they embark on their journey?
Whatever you do, do not do it for money. Whatever you do, do not do it for money. If you're in it for the money, you're just either going to be a fraud and you'll be successful and you can make a lot of money doing that. There's a lot of finance YouTubers that do that.
Yeah.
B, if you do it for the money, you're going to not see success in the beginning and you're going to quit anyway. So you're going to waste all this time. You're going to say, oh, boo hoo, I'm not getting any views on my videos. You're going to quit anyway. So if you're doing something like you guys are doing, like for the passion of it, that's eventually going to grow into something on its own, because people listen to people that they like, know, and trust. They buy from people that they like, know, and trust, right? It's sales 101. So when I saw how authentic you guys were on Twitter and all that stuff with your message, authenticity is contagious. And you're also able to speak intelligently on your subject because you're a subject matter expert on it. You're not someone trying to fake it till you make it, which is also
Right.
another a way you can achieve success. But like if I don't know something, I'm going to ask you guys, and whatever you guys tell. If you told me to eat like cow heart, 3 times a day, if I want to achieve certain results, like you best believe I'm going to be there, like eating cow heart 3 times a day. My point is that you're the subject matter expert. I'm not. I'm going to listen to you. Um, so don't do it for the money. The second part is there's a Malcolm Gladwell book called The Dip. Okay. So once you reach this dip and you're not seeing the results that you want to see, you need to make a strategic decision of, okay, am I not seeing results because, and this isn't the book, I'm not going to ruin the premise of the book, but it's basically, am I not seeing the results because, I'm doing something wrong, or am I just in something that's not profitable, or do I need to rethink this whole thing? So you can either quit at the dip or you can push through the dip and achieve success. So here's a perfect example. I can only speak for myself, but I had a channel for a couple years. I took like 6 months off. I had moderate success, but I only had like 10 to 15,000 subscribers. In the meantime, I'm working in capital markets, commercial real estate lending. We're doing, 10, 20, $30 million loans. I'm working nonstop. It's almost investment banking hours. And I'm still making YouTube videos, when I get home. So it's crazy hours. But my point is that, I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm making like maybe 10, 15, 20 bucks a day in ad revenue, if that. I'm working all these hours, recording, editing, thumbnails, descriptions, this, that, whatever. And my wife's like, well, you put all this work into it, why quit now? So guess what? So one of the jobs that I first had after the recession was selling cars. So I had a finance degree and I'm selling cars, which I could do, without a high school diploma. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about car sales. I'm just saying you don't need to go to college, for a finance degree to sell cars. And I'm in the greatest recession of all time, and I'm selling cars, and I hate it. I hated taking advantage of people. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But at the dealership I was at, they use what's called a Foursquare. It's a messed up method. So what do I make a video about? How car dealerships rip you off. And guess what video blew up my channel, making me able to go full time? Car sales, how car dealerships rip you off. So it's almost ironic, whether you guys believe in, God, the Matrix, computer programming, Mother Nature, whatever this is, aliens, I don't know what the hell we are, or what this is, but there is a higher power, and it's almost like a joke. Like, hey, I made you eat shit and work car sales for 2 years. Sorry, can we swear? I apologize. I feel
Yeah,
like,
Absolutely.
yeah, you guys aren't monetized yet, so it doesn't matter, right?
No, most
I'm just messing with you.
most of our audience is 60 plus, so I think they'll appreciate it.
Oh, really? Okay.
They're like 40 to 60.
Okay. So, the God or whatever makes you eat crap selling cars for 2 years. And guess what video blows up my channel, allowing me to be full-time on YouTube for the past, 2-3 years? It's how car dealerships rip you off. And it's crazy how the world works. So my point so tying this all back to the dip is, if I wanted to quit and my wife didn't say, well, you did all this work to get here, I would have never made the videos that have made me, a great living so far off YouTube. So it's all about understanding whether you're doing things completely wrong and there's room for improvement, and to push through the dip, or to quit completely and kind of, reevaluate everything. So it's a hard question to answer, but, go until you reach the dip at least.
It's such a powerful story, because people only ever see the finished product of Marko, but they don't actually know what actually went on behind the scenes of you literally having to sell cars during the recession, trying to make videos and thumbnails and do all the editing, making no money. When we had Marty Ben on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, I think he had mentioned he was working full time at Barstool and pumping out like 4 to 5 newsletters a week. People don't see that. They only see Marty Ben, and it's like, oh, 150,000 Twitter followers. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? But no, people don't understand the work that goes in behind the scenes. And you think it's cliche, but there's so many. You continue to ask people how they became successful, and there's so many stories that are similar to yours out there in their own unique way.
100% well said. And it's like, you see, overnight successes take decades, years in the making. You just think they're an overnight success because, they just got popular now. But my whole message, I know I may sound like pompous with the whole, if you have an internet connection, you can make money, but it really is true. Like, I'm a regular dude. My parents are immigrants. I had no, advantages or disadvantages. I grew up, regular kid, middle class, greater Cleveland. Like, there's no recipe for this. It's just find something you're passionate about, study it deeply. And then if you feel comfortable enough, share it with the world. And there's no better way to do that than through the internet.
Yeah. So we've talked about this a bit, but you mentioned Bitcoin before, and I'm curious how, not to take a complete right turn, but this is kind of the wave of the future, right? These cryptocurrencies, where you're sitting now, like how did you get involved, starting investing in those? And how do you think about those going forward?
Yeah, so so you say Bitcoin, then you say those. So you have to realize if you're talking to like a Bitcoin maximalist, they're like, there is no other those. There's just Bitcoin. Everything else is a shit coin. It's an altcoin. But I'm not that extreme. I speculate on altcoins, but Bitcoin, it makes up 95% of my crypto net worth easily. The reason for that is because instead of um, explaining all this on the podcast, I'll give your audience a few books to read. And I have a video on this. I'm not plugging my video, but if they want a structured list, I have a video on
Yeah.
Bitcoin books that you have to read. So, so to best understand Bitcoin, there's a book called The Bullish Case for Bitcoin.
Mm.
Sets the whole picture, the big picture of why Bitcoin is what it is and why it's so important moving forward for a sound monetary system. And then you can read Inventing Bitcoin, which is written by Jan Pritzker. It explains the technical way that Bitcoin works, and it's written for people that are laymen, that are technical laymen like me and you. We're not sitting
Mm.
here pretending to be computer programmers, but it shows how it works. And proof of work is a big component of Bitcoin, which we can discuss. And then after that, you should read the Bitcoin Standard. And once you read those three books, you'll understand why it's so popular. So, in a nutshell, in 1971, we went off the gold standard. Okay. So that's when Nixon said, hey, we are now on a fiat money. So fiat is just dollar bills. Dollar bills used to be backed by gold and reserves. They are no longer backed by gold. It's literally just made up money. It's by decree. That's what fiat means. It means let
Mm.
it be. So once that happened, you can start to see a lot of different macroeconomic indicators talking about, your productivity versus your hourly rate. Wages have been stagnant since the 70s, relatively speaking. We've printed trillions of dollars just in the past 24 months. 80% of every dollar in existence was printed in the last 24 months. So 80 cents out of a dollar in the last 24 months in all of history. So the reason I'm a big Bitcoiner is because it's a sound monetary system that is decentralized completely. There is no, Harry doesn't issue it, you don't issue it, I don't issue it. It's literally just math, and it's an algorithm, and it's backed up by proof of work, meaning that certain transactions have to be verified, or excuse me, all transactions have to be verified in a public ledger showing that, Marko paid Harry $1, for example, right? And that stays in the blockchain throughout eternity as long as there's nodes running. Nodes are just computers that run the Bitcoin protocol, the Bitcoin software, and those are all over the world. And some are anonymous; you can never stop it. So anyway, my point is that once you expend electricity to do these really, really, really difficult math problems, which are miners. When you hear Bitcoin mining, that's all that's doing is solving really hard mathematical problems to verify the network. They verify blocks of information. Marko paid Harry $1. Harry paid his mom $3, whatever. Once those are verified, the miner is then rewarded in Bitcoin. Okay, so that's, you're expending energy, you're working out, you're doing pull-ups, push-ups, all this stuff, you're eating healthy, you have the good physique. That's the reward in Bitcoin. So the beauty of it is that Bitcoin, the reward started at 50 Bitcoin for every block that's verified. So every 210,000 blocks, roughly every 4 years, that reward gets cut in half. So there's a finite amount of Bitcoin ever, 21 million ever. That reward gets harder and harder and harder to achieve every 4 years, which only drives the price of Bitcoin up. So I know this may be a little bit too technical for some of the audience. And if they're like my dad, they're like, oh, what's Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what? Like, but anyway, it's hard to convince people that haven't gone down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin. But in a nutshell, it's essentially digital gold in the fact that it's finitely scarce. It's difficult and difficult. It's more and more difficult to mine every year. And the reward gets cut in half every 210,000 blocks of information every 4 years, roughly. So it becomes more difficult to mine. It becomes more difficult to extract. And there's a scarce amount of it. And it's completely decentralized. There is no Jerome Powell saying, oh, we got to raise rates, we got to lower rates, we got to, increase the M2 money supply looking like a hockey stick by trillions of dollars. That's why a lot of people really, really like it. It's almost like being like a gold bug in 2022.
Do you view it more as a technological advancement, in the sense that the blockchain really does solve for a lot of the issues that we run into with central banking, or like how would you kind of sell it or pitch it to your dad or someone who's not fully sold? It's like some of the harder conversations. Yeah.
I've tried. I got to work on my sales pitch. No, I'm kidding. So the
Everyone
thing is,
does.
for the people that want to learn about it, it could, in my opinion, if it's allowed to do what it's inevitably going to do, is it's going to replace fiat money. Or if you read Nick Badia's Layered Money, I just had him on my podcast.
I've got that
if you
right
read,
here.
yeah, it's a great book. Layered Money, he's saying that Bitcoin may be the base layer or a world reserve currency. So if you look at wars going on, obviously Russia and Ukraine right now, transactions are happening in Bitcoin. Putin said, okay, I'll accept Bitcoin. Ukraine is being funded partially by Bitcoin. There is no intermediary. There's no one to say, there's no IMF, International Monetary Fund. There's no UN sanctions. There's no anything that can stop it. It's literally just math and internet. So I think that if it's allowed to do what it's inevitably going to do, I think it could be the next paradigm of money. I think money is already digital. 90% of money is already digital. 3% is only coins and paper notes. Like when you go to the bank, they may give you some money, but all that stuff is ones and zeros in a computer system. That's how money works. It's inevitable that crypto is going to be the next paradigm of money. It just depends on if it's going to be Bitcoin or not. But when you look at every other altcoin, Bitcoin is the only coin that is completely decentralized. There's no CEO, there's no marketing team, there's no pre-mine, there's no anything like that. That's why it's the one true thing that could really turn the monetary system around.
It's almost like I think like Bitcoin is almost boring in a sense to a lot of people who are looking for it to get adopted faster. And so a lot of people have to mess around with these altcoins and feel the pain of losing some money in an altcoin before you come back to Bitcoin and really actually understand the principles of it. Did you sort of have a similar experience?
No, I've never had a
shitcoin phase. We're like, boom.
No. So you got to realize I'm relatively, I don't want to say conservative. That's the wrong way to phrase it, but I'm not out here, looking to 1000x. I'm not out here looking to be some, grandpa dividend investor. Like I have a dividend portfolio for my retirement account, but that's not my primary taxable account. So Bitcoin, in my opinion, is like buying a blue chip crypto, a blue chip stock, if you will. It's like I hate to say, but like Johnson & Johnson or, whatever, it's technically a blue chip stock. So I think, without beating, a dead horse, I just think that in my opinion, it's the hardest and soundest form of money ever created. But that's if it's allowed to be adopted. Governments can't stop it, but, they also seized gold in the past. They've done that as well. So I'm not like a gold bug either, but I think I'd fall in the school of Austrian economics, which is sound money. And you see, we're having inflation because we don't have sound money right now. Typically, I think we're at the end of the empire, of the American empire. That's just my personal opinion. You can read books about it with Sovereign Individual, The Fourth Turning. Any stages of an empire typically last 600 years. And I feel like we're kind of getting to that 400 to 600 year range where people are trusting institutions less. If you look at like college and big higher education and stuff like that,
healthcare
system, exactly. So I think we're kind of getting to that end of an empire stage.
Yeah.
And you also know that when you're funding wars endlessly, which, we've done the last, obviously 20 years. So, and I'm apolitical, by the way. So I'm not coming at this from a certain political angle. I just feel that it's just inevitable. It's history. I'm a fan of history. And if you look at, Russian Empire, Dutch Empire, all these empires, Roman Empire, they start funding wars, they get spread too thin, the currency collapses, it's on to the next empire, which in 2022, it's most likely going to be China.
Marko, have you read Tucker Max's piece, Doom or Optimism?
No, I think I'm familiar with Tucker Max, but I'm not familiar with that piece.
Yeah, so Clemenza sent it to me a few weeks ago, and he's really changed his tune the last few years, and he's really into the regenerative agriculture space and being self-sufficient now. And that's he writes this whole blog just spelling out what he sees happening, what he sees coming in the next 5 to 10 years. And he's been right about a lot of different past events. And I will send it to you because it's pretty much spot on. But it kind of ties into the convergence of food and finance, like you were talking about before, where people are trying to be a little bit more decentralized with their finances. People are also trying to be more hyper localized with the food that they're putting into their system. And that's where I think our accounts are very similar, where, we try and preach about, actually getting in touch with your farmer, shaking their hand, getting to know who they are, maybe trying to grow some of your own food, because everyone just blanket expects to be able to go to a supermarket and pick up a piece of meat in a neatly wrapped plastic bag. You have no idea where it comes from. But what happens when you go to the supermarket and there's a shortage, right? It's like Clemenza, I think, posted this the other day. It's, I think trying to control 60 to 70% of the world's supply of like wheat, corn, and soy. So you can pretty much bet your ass that there's going to be some type of food shortage over the coming years, and you just have to be prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm not sure you guys follow this side of the thing a little bit more closely, but I also, before I get into this tangent, I 100% am the person you described. So I live in a suburb of Cleveland. So when people think of Cleveland, most people have never been here. It's actually not that bad. But obviously, everything south of Cleveland is, rural area until you get to Columbus, Ohio. Then you have farmland. Then you get to Cincinnati. So we have I'm lucky enough to have a lot of farms close by me. So I live by Lake Erie. I have a freshwater ocean to the north, and I have all this agriculture to the south, right? It's a big ass lake, ton of farms. So I just signed up for this CSA program. I think it's called like Community Something Agriculture. I can't remember. But every week they bring you 8 to 10 items, 4 to 5 servings of each item, all from local farms, and it's all sourced locally. It's all within 50 miles of Greater Cleveland, or the city that I live in, which is a suburb of Cleveland. But my point is that I'm all about, being a sovereign individual, not having to rely on anyone for anything, to an extent. Obviously, police, firefighters, things like that, things that taxes, go towards are fine. But my point is that I don't want, handouts from the government or wait in line for bread or any of that stuff. I've seen that happen. My parents are immigrants from Yugoslavia, which was not, it was socialist. It was not necessarily, it was communist in a way, but it wasn't aligned with the East or with the West. But my point is that I've been to villages and farms where you see the natural process of life, to your point, where you go to the grocery store, everything's in a little Ziploc vacuum thing. You don't know where the hell that piece of meat came from. I'm seeing the cow, take a shit, the grass grows, they eat the grass. It's a natural cycle of life, as opposed to here where it's like you have cows standing up to their shins and, urine and feces and stuff like that. You don't know where the hell your food is coming from. It's typically a factory farm. So I'm a big proponent of, humanely and sustainably providing nutrition for me and my family through food.
It really speaks to the two poles that cryptocurrency is kind of addressing, which is the centralization and decentralization, or said differently, kind of like capitalism and democracy versus more of like a socialist communist state. And I do feel like a lot of people are awakening up to that and figuring out, hey, maybe I need to take a little bit more personal autonomy, which I think speaks to a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, even just on your YouTube channel, just, how to get your personal finances in order, how to invest in things that are going to be a little bit more insulated from centralized issues if they do arise in the future.
Yeah, a good way to do that is through commodities. Typically, commodities fight inflation, but now we have a huge war going on in Ukraine, so my wife is Ukrainian, and they're the breadbasket of Europe. They have a ton. I mean, they're using that a lot as just I don't want to say propaganda to say this is why prices are skyrocketing, because they have a lot of reserves and they're just, I think, using that as an excuse to gouge people. But Ukraine is, the whole middle of the country is flat, right? There's only the Carpathian Mountains in the west for the most part, but everything else is kind of like wheat, corn, stuff like that. But my point is that I think it's cool now, like in your early mid 30s, like it's cool to have a garden. It's cool to be, self-sustainable. It's cool to, eat something fresh from your garden, because not only does it taste better and it's more nutritious, you know where it came from, and there's a sense of pride. It's like a sense of pride of like killing an animal. You're going to eat everything, dude. You're going to make jello out of the bones. You're going to eat the brain. You're going to eat the heart. You're going to eat liver. For the audience, or not for this podcast, but for 99% of Americans, when was the last time you ate an organ meat? When was the last time you ate an organ meat? Never, dude. You're eating muscle meat all the time, which is
Yeah.
fine. But most nutrition, like I grew up, so when I go to Serbia, I go to Serbia all the time. Serbia, Montenegro, and anyone in the Balkans is going to know, we have pashteta. Like pashteta is liver. It's literally, you
Mm.
have chicken
Okay,
liver,
kinda.
goose liver, yeah, pig liver, and it's delicious. And that's literally the only form of organ meat that I get in my, standard American diet, which I'm
Hmm.
trying to get away from. But you see how my grandpa used to eat. They're making, salted jello out of the bones. They're making,
Mm.
they use every part of the animal. My point is that it's more rewarding and you have more pride and respect for that animal if you were to, kill it or raise it yourself.
Yeah, we talk about that a good amount where, and you're probably, I would think that you relate to this a bit, that in the US, we've gotten away from like the ritualistic aspects of what it means to be connected with your food. I think like a lot of European countries, I lived in, uh, I lived in the Netherlands and Italy for a little bit, and both of those countries, more so Italy, like the family that I was living with, their connection with their food, like they're only buying locally. They only buy what's being brought into the farmers market, and they have a deep connection with their food, not only where they're getting their food from, but also how they're enjoying their food. They'll eat every meal together. That's just
Absolutely.
so like against the grain in the US. Like it's not as common to sit down and have like a nice meal with your family, as it
Yeah.
once probably used to be.
Yeah, I think Sunday dinner is very important. I'm starting to see that more and more with my wife's family. She has a bigger family, much bigger than mine, and that's how you keep a family together is through food, man. I'm telling you, it
Mhm.
sounds crazy, but
No,
the
definitely not.
second I turned 16 and got a license and stopped eating dinner with my parents, that's when you start to like. Don't get me wrong, I have a great relationship with my parents, but like you notice it. Like Sunday dinner is important. Supporting your local economy, whether it's through capitalism or socialism or whatever you guys think is best. Support your local farmers, support local. It's like, why would I buy something from a big box store? I don't know where the hell it came from when I can buy from, Joe Farmer down the street and help him and his family out. So I'm
Yeah.
happy to pay more for stuff like that.
Hmm. Marko, speaking of parenthood, how has being a father just changed your overall perspective on life and outlook?
So so this is the thing. So there are people out there that can't have kids, and this is not aimed towards them. It's like the same thing when you and I talk about fitness and running sprints or whatever. Obviously, we're not talking to people who physically aren't able to run sprints or work out or do stuff like that. So everything I'm about to say, I just want to preface that. In my opinion, if you're able to have kids biologically, you should have kids. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of Western propaganda that says kids are too expensive, they're too this, they're too that. I'm telling you, if you have a good relationship and a good household to bring them up in, I understand if you don't want to bring them up in a bad situation, which I'm not talking to those people. Fatherhood has absolutely changed my life. I've always wanted to be a father. My wife and I were blessed enough to have an 8-month-old, obviously 8 months ago. And ever since then, it's not only brought me and my wife closer together, but our in laws and my parents and the family, and everyone lives for that kid now. It's crazy. They're like the center of attention. Like we just had Mother's Day yesterday at my in laws' house, and my parents were there, and everyone's holding the baby, playing with her. She's, uncles, aunts, my in-law, my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, you name it. So my point to all this is that there's a reason for this.
Mm.
Money aside, in my opinion, kids are the greatest wealth. Okay, you can have a bajillion dollars, but kids add a level of excuse me, to your life that money cannot.
Mm.
So I truly believe that. But I'm also in a situation where I make a good living. My wife's a nurse practitioner; she makes a good living. Our finances are in order. So it's kind of like get your house in order first. It's like put your oxygen mask on first on the plane, then get married and have kids. I mean, you don't have to get married because some people don't want to bring the state into their relationship, which is fine. But having kids, in my opinion, is one of the greatest sources of wealth.
What's what have you learned these first few months of fatherhood? Just, from what you were doing before, I'm sure like starting your own business in a way, like that's like your child in a sense for a while, but now you actually have someone else to take care of. I'm sure that brings a whole new level of intention to everything that you're doing.
Yeah. So I worked in sales a lot of my life, whether it was in finance, loans or, car sales or whatever. All the most successful guys I talk to, they're like, dude, I have kids to stay motivated. They're like, I like debt. I like being in debt. I like having kids. It keeps me motivated. But you just live for someone else. Like, you know, I don't exist anymore. My wife doesn't exist. We're a unit. We're a team. But you live for that kid now, and it brings every decision you make, you think about your kid first. So, you know, if I wasn't 34 with a wife and kids, you know, who knows how much of my net worth would be in, you know, Bitcoin or more speculative stuff. But as you get older, you know, you want to be a little bit more conservative. And not only that, it's the business is your baby, but nothing will compare to your actual child that came from you. Because when you touch their hair, it's your hair. When you smell their skin, it's your skin. When you see them bleed, it's your blood. It truly is not from some like weird, you know, legacy building thing or any of that stuff. I don't care about that. It would be nice to leave a nice legacy, but your kids are a huge motivator, and it just gives you a ton of perspective on life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think you brought up, you said legacy, and I think about, I don't know about you guys, but you know, I had a really close relationship with my grandparents, and like in particular my grandma, and I don't think her intention was to ever leave a legacy, but she most certainly did, just by like the way she lived her life. And I feel like if you're like really focused on all these pillars of life that you're talking about, Marko, you inevitably leave something behind that's not money, but really just this like spirit or essence of like how to live a good life for your kid and and their children, to understand like, hey, there was someone before me who did it the right way, and I owe it to them to live a certain way.
Dude, that's so insightful.
Yeah.
That's so insightful. And I didn't mean to interrupt, but like I think
No.
about my own grandparents. Dude, my grandma was a cleaning lady. She cleaned office buildings in downtown Cleveland, night shift, bro, graveyard shift. You know,
Dude.
like started at, you know, midnight, left at 8 a.m. You know, that kind of a thing. No English, no nothing. You know, my grandpa was a semi truck mechanic. No English, no money. Just figured it out. My dad didn't go to college. He's just a smart dude. He was lucky enough to come here in the late 70s and grow up a little bit to where you can still get a good job as an engineer without a degree.
Yeah.
Now everyone's got a degree. A college degree is a high school diploma now. You know, everyone's got a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
So my point is like you see what your grandpa would do. You see what your dad would do. You see, that's why, in my opinion, the biggest thing in this country, other than health, because dude, you fly to any other airport, you can spot an American person like this because they're huge. They're twice the size of everyone else. And I don't say that to be an asshole. It's just it's the truth. I just speak the truth. Okay.
Yeah.
So my point is that other than health, I think the deterioration of the family unit is a big contributor to a lot of decadence that we see today in this country. And because you don't have that inner monologue saying like, okay, I can, you know, rob the store, I can sell these drugs, I can, you know, I can get rich selling coke. I don't know, you know, that
Yeah.
I've never done it, but you have this inner monologue. Would your grandpa have done that? Would your dad have done that? Would your mom have done that? You know, to your grandma as an example, I'm sure you think of her even subconsciously when you go to make a, you know, somewhat, you know, ethical or moral decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just in you. It's weird. It's hard to explain.
Yeah. And like, you know, over the past year, I've taken more risks than I've ever taken in my life, just personally, the perception of risk. And a lot of the frameworks that I was using to digest taking those steps in my life was just through the lens of her life, where she grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania and had to make a decision at a certain point whether she wanted to stay in Pennsylvania, this one stoplight town, or move to a city and try to make something for herself. And then she ended up working for the CIA and having like some, you know, a career that she wouldn't have otherwise had if she hadn't have left. So I'm thinking about my own life. I'm like, this isn't a risk. This is me having an opportunity to go make something of myself and like create my own path. Absolutely. And just having her as a backdrop just makes that decision so much easier to make.
Yeah, if you look at the original people that went west in this country, you know, they were rugged individuals. It's the Oregon Trail, dude. You ever play Oregon Trail as a kid? Am I too old?
Yeah.
I'm 34,
No.
bro. It's like Marko died of dysentery. Oops. You know, it's like, well, good
Yeah.
thing we got 3 other kids, you know. That's obviously an oversimplified example, but look at all the people that went west, man. It's like, it's crazy. You know, it's imagine immigrants. You're going to Ellis Island, you know, you're Giuseppe Cantolini, right? You know, and then they turn your name into like Joe Canty, and you're Joe Canty now. Go figure it out, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you don't speak the English, you have no money, like you just figure it out, dude. One of the problems, me and my brother-in-law talk about this all the time. If you grow up middle class with everything given to you, or if you grow up as a trustafarian, you know, trust fund baby with all this money given to you, you have too many options. Like it goes back to that old Biggie Smalls line. It's like you either selling crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot. You're either pro sports or you're selling dope, and that's how you get out of the ghetto, right? So I feel like when you're in the middle, I was middle class my whole life, but there's something wrong with me. Like I've always been entrepreneurial, but when you create things and get out of your comfort zone, as you mentioned, as you mentioned with your grandma and with yourself, that's when you get the high ROI that I alluded to earlier in the podcast.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And I also, like, just to tie in like another personal experience with the immigrants that you were talking about. When I was over in Italy, I was tutoring this guy who was an immigrant from Senegal who didn't speak any English. And I was tutoring him in English, but neither of us spoke a common language. Like I was learning Italian, I was learning Italian and he didn't speak Italian. So my host brother would come and like kind of help us out, like help us figure out like how we can actually, it was really just like spending time with this guy who was trying to make something of himself in Italy. And it was one of those experiences that you hold with you the rest of your life when you realize like, oh my God, this guy actually took a boat from Senegal to Italy, landed on the shore, and then now is just trying to figure out what he's doing with his life. It gives you, back to your travel point, these are the types of things that just give you perspective in life when it's like, if shit's getting tough when you're writing Twitter threads or like trying to fucking make it online, like you're fine. And just keep going and have like that relentless pursuit for something, because there are people out there who would die to be in your shoes, or
100%.
So I think that tying it back to that travel piece, there's just so many people out there who are going through so much other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that hashtag first world problems, I mean, that really is a thing. It's like, oh, my Wi-Fi is down. It's like, oh no, what's going to happen? And you have people, getting blown up, right now. It's like, it's crazy, dude. Like we lack perspective. And I think that's why everyone's offended today. Everyone's, cancel culture, all that stuff, because we have nothing. Humans innately want something to strive for. They want a common goal, a common enemy, a common whatever. And we don't have that because life is too easy right now in the Western world. So we create enemies, and we get angry online, and everyone's Mike Tyson behind a keyboard. It's like, dude, I get 99% of my comments are positive because I'm just mainly an educational channel. But you have the 1% that is like some idiot leaves a comment and it bothers you just because we're human. It's like, oh, I get 99 out of 100 comments are positive. You got the one dude that has Cheeto stained sweatpants in his mom's basement, and you're letting him get to you. It's like, that's why I don't even read comments anymore. But the thing is, the internet, social media in general, it allows people to speak their mind, but it also allows people to hide behind a keyboard. Like there's also genuine or common courtesy that I would never say something to you in person that people say to you online because they know there's no repercussions. So, it's just common courtesy. It's, being a nice, decent human being, try and act online how you would in person. That's kind of my thing. So
100%. And we think that that's a fantastic way to end it, honestly.
Yeah.
Probably talk to you for hours, but we'll definitely have to have you back on for a part 2, Marko. What's the best way for the audience to connect with you, just to learn more about your work and, what you're doing in the finance space?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Thank you for having me on. It's Marko, WhiteBoard Finance. If you just go to YouTube, you can type in WhiteBoard Finance. I'm on Twitter, WhiteBoard Fin, Fin. And then Instagram is WhiteBoard Finance, completely spelled out. And that's about it, man. I try and touch on a little bit everything on my channel. It's mostly evergreen stuff, personal finance, stock market, real estate investing, things that I actually have real world experience in that I've done. Otherwise, I don't feel comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
And then also, I just think that you guys are doing a great thing because there's a mass awakening now that now that there's information prevalent everywhere. Like we talked about, if you have a cell phone, you have all the world's knowledge in your palm.
Yeah.
People are starting to realize like, hey, maybe this fast food really is pretty bad. Like everyone always knew it was bad, But now people are starting to realize, okay, who knows what's in this mystery meat disc that I'm getting. So I think what you guys are doing just with your lifestyle in general, finance is a stool or a leg on the stool. I mean, you guys are absolutely, the other leg with nutrition and lifestyle and things like that. So I applaud you guys big time.
Appreciate it, man. We'll have to figure out a way to make this, make some connections here between what we're doing. Cause I do feel like the bridge between these two gaps is such a foundational, it probably makes up 95% of, what it means to be sovereign, self-sufficient. The bedrock of a happy life is between health and wealth, right? So if you can master those two, you're in a good spot. So we'll have to keep connecting and figure out ways to do stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I wasn't familiar. I know your subject matter, but I wasn't familiar with your audience. So if this is completely out of left field, I'm sorry, guys.
No, dude, it's going to resonate really well. I think a lot of our people are really tuned into what's happening in the world, and I think that a big component of that is what's happening in the markets, and also I think just general lifestyle stuff that we touched on. So this was a great one, dude. And we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.